When you haven't menstruated or had a period for 12 months in a row, on that day, that line in the sand, that's officially the day of menopause. And then every other day after that, which is more than a third of most women's lives, is the post-menopause phase. So it's so interesting that that one word, menopause, which is one day in a woman's life, has had all the limelight and media over time, and really it just is one point in time.
Welcome to Your Second Act, the podcast that proves that life doesn't have to end at 40, 50, or even 60, because when it comes to living your best life, age is just a number.
Hi, gorgeous. Thank you so much for tuning in again. Now, I know I've only got a few seconds to capture your interest, especially if you've read what the title of the episode is. And you might be thinking, nah, that's not for me, but just wait, because I think you're going to find this one really interesting. Yes, it's about perimenopause and menopause, but today we're going to take it back to the basics because honestly, I don't know about you, but there is so much information out there and it can still become so overwhelming. And even though I'm already in menopause, I still find myself wondering things like, how exactly does HRT benefit me? What are the risks? What's the difference between all the options? These are the kind of questions so many of us want answers to. And sometimes, I don't know, I feel a little bit embarrassed to go back or ask those questions because people would think, or I actually think, you should know this stuff. You've been in it for a while. But the thing is, I forget or I get confused. And that's why today I've invited Sarah Gray. She's a health professional in pharmacy nutrition and a certified menopause practitioner. Sarah has this practical, great, down-to-earth way of really explaining things that actually make sense. And that's why she's here with us today to answer all these questions. She's also written a book called It's Not You, It's Perimenopause, which is a reader-friendly, trustworthy resource that's free from all the hype, fluff, and fads. So let's just get into her episode and ask these questions that so many of us want answers to. Let's start at the beginning. What is the difference between perimenopause and menopause?
Yeah, great question. Thank you, Michelle. This is a really interesting question, and I think something that as women we're finding out now, like why didn't we get taught this like back in high school? But menopause is actually just one point in time, which still blows my mind. And I'll explain the difference now. So we're born with a certain amount of eggs. We're running out of those eggs, so our ovulation and menstrual cycle is slowing down. Whole cascade of hormone changes are happening. And that period of time when everything is slowing down is perimenopause. So it's the time before we're hitting menopause. And it is actually the most kind of troublesome time for symptoms. So that's the time where your ovaries are winding down, your hormones are really fluctuating, and your periods are getting irregular and you're ovulating and menstruating less and less. Now, when you haven't menstruated or had a period for 12 months in a row, on that day, that line in the sand, that's officially the day of menopause. And then every other day after that, which is more than a third of most women's lives, is the post-menopause phase. So it's so interesting that that one word, menopause, which is one day in a woman's life, has had all the limelight and media over time. And really, it just is one point in time.
Right. Yeah. So what I want to ask as well is I've been post-menopause for 5 years, but I don't understand when people say I'm in menopause. But if you're saying that's one day, then what do I say I'm in? And this is what I don't understand.
Yeah, it's a great question. But I usually try and explain the period between sort of perimenopause through to that day of menopause as the menopause transition. So you're in like a transition period. When you hit menopause, you can now be saying that you're postmenopausal, so you're after menopause. And that's where the majority of your life is lived, usually after postmenopause. Like a third of your adult life is in that time, usually on average, when we look at the average age of that day of menopause being around 51. So yeah, you're postmenopausal, you're past the menopause phase, essentially. But people say they're in menopause. I think it's because really it's confusing, and we're never really taught that as women. Like, we're taught about periods and puberty, but it's not until now all of this news and information's coming out with lots of wonderful advocates that we're understanding what that word actually means. So when I see clients and they say, "Oh, yep, Sarah, I'm in menopause," I really start to break down and understand more what stage are they at, because that's very important in terms of then how you treat and how you support that individual at that point in time.
Okay. So if we go back to Perry, how young can you be to actually be in perimenopause?
Yeah, so there are exceptions to this, so I won't talk about that. But briefly, there are people that go through premature menopause, and due to whether it's a hysterectomy at earlier age or other things. I'll park that. On average, it's usually around early 40s. So early 40s are when most women start experiencing these symptoms where the number of eggs that they have left are declining, and you start to get these changes in hormones and symptoms. But it can happen in early 30s for some women. So it actually can start happening a bit earlier. It really is just individual. A great way of trying to sort of find out what might happen for you, and it's not always perfect, is to ask your mum. Ask your mum. If you've got grandparents, ask them, your grandmother. Usually it's quite similar in the family kind of pipeline. Look, I don't know if that's going to happen for me. My mum didn't have her day of menopause until she was about 57, 58, which is quite late. And I already feel like, it's probably coming for me. So, and also she's still having hot flashes and she's in her mid to late 60s. So really you can ask your mother to get an idea. But we say anywhere between mid 30s up until sort of mid to late 40s is that period. But I heard a really great piece of research the other day, and a person speaking about it saying, look, most women in their early 40s are going to probably have some signs of perimenopause. It's kind of just generally, if you're in that early 40s bracket, you're probably going to be in that period, whether it's very early or a bit later on, you probably are a bit perimenopausal.
Okay. So symptoms. What are the most common symptoms? I mean, the most common one I always hear about, and obviously the one that I definitely suffered with and still do occasionally, I had one when we first started chatting, is the hot flush. But what are the other symptoms that, we can expect?
Yeah, and just to pause on hot flushes, it isn't the most common, but the reason why it gets all the attention is because it's one that's usually not related to anything else. So like you don't normally get these really quick sort of rapid hot flushes and you get the temperature, you just can't control the temperature. It's a real sort of hallmark sign. So it allows a medical professional to say, oh, it's probably looking like it could be hormone related. There's very few other things that cause that kind of rapid rush of temperature, which is why it gets the limelight. More common are things like irregular periods or changes in periods, so very heavy menstrual bleeding for some women. Mood changes, from high to low, sort of, normal mood. When I say high, sort of, your normal happy self, and then dropping down to quite low mood. And low mood and even into depression can be quite common, which is something that you should definitely speak to somebody about as soon as possible. Waking up in the middle of the night at 3 a.m. So sleep disturbances may be due to a night sweat, may just be because of the hormonal imbalance. And midline weight gain. So as you get a changes to hormones, your body weight distribution changes, and you do get a lot more body weight being held around that midline. That's usually the one that I see women coming to me for the most, because obviously my nutrition background, they want help with that. That's quite a common one too. There is so many other symptoms, things like, frozen shoulder or dizziness or tinnitus, like there's a really long list. And it's good to look at places like Jean Hales or even on my own website where there's kind of checklists of the top, say, 30 or 40 common symptoms, and you can kind of have a look at how your symptoms are all matching up together. Without going on about this too much, it's really important also to not always assume the symptoms are perimenopause. And that's another kind of common thread at the moment. So you may be really tired, you may be having sleep disturbance, and that may be because your iron is low. So it may not, it's always good to think about, it could be this, but it's usually the picture of symptoms together that paints the picture to the doctor about whether or not you're actually in that phase of life.
Okay, so if you are experiencing some of these symptoms, when should you really go and seek help? Like what should you do?
Yeah, such a great question. And I always say, if there's anything in your life from a health perspective that doesn't feel right, you should never delay speaking to a health professional. So I don't think you should sit there thinking, oh, I have to have 3 of these symptoms on the checklist for 3 months before I go to the doctor. If you're waking up in the middle of the night and that's impacting your sleep cycle and your ability to function the next day, or if you're having hot flushes that are really causing you distress, or your mood's changing, or you're dizzy, or you're having any of these symptoms, go to your doctor as soon as possible. There's no real kind of, oh, at this point is when you go. And it probably is better to go to the doctor earlier because they can record, oh, yeah, Sarah came in on this day and had these symptoms, and I come back in a few months, I've got other symptoms. The doctor gets a bit more of a big picture of what's happening. So I always say, don't hold back. Don't think you have to wait. And when you speak to your medical professional and you're giving them all these symptoms, they'll be the one that will help you determine when it's time to take action from like a medical view. But there's still some things that you can do if you're getting sort of the start of symptoms too. So it's a hard question to answer, but I always just go back to think about, is that symptom impacting my quality of life? Are people saying to me, oh, you okay all the time, or are you checking on your mood, or are you feeling like you're snapping at people a bit more, or that you're not sleeping well, or that you're gaining weight? Always go and speak to somebody and get some advice, because the time point will be very individual for each person.
Yeah. So I guess if you go to your doctor, how do they measure if you have it or not?
Yeah, another really good question. So number of things they'll do. So when you think about modern medicine now, when you go to speak to a typical doctor, you get 15 to 30 minutes. So, I can turn up to the doctor and say I'm having dizziness. I've got my migraines are getting worse and I'm not sleeping. And the doctor's got 15 minutes to work out like what that is. So it is actually, they're obviously trained very well to do that. So what I would suggest is that you basically go to the doctor, prepare yourself for that conversation with the doctor. So go to the doctor with a list of things that are happening. These are my cluster of symptoms. Even if you write them down, these are the 3 that are really impacting my life. And then what can I do about it, if that makes sense? Because then that gives the doctor more of an opportunity to have a look at everything that's happening versus one individual thing. So the doctor will usually look at that suite of symptoms. That's the best way to get a diagnosis. They'll also run usually some blood tests, which will try and eliminate any of those other possible causes of your symptoms, like low iron or thyroid problems. And they may or may not call for hormonal blood tests. Now, this is an area of lots of controversy because you probably know and heard that, a point in time in perimenopause, your hormones are really sort of changing. So what I'll test as today will be very different to what I'll test as tomorrow. But what can be useful is to get a hormonal blood test at day 21 of your cycle. And that's a really good point to have a look at hormonal trends. And then you can get a blood test 3 months later. So it gives the doctor an idea of those trends. So some doctors may or may not want that as part of the diagnostic picture. I'll use a personal example maybe here just to help with that. So my doctor does do these tests for me. Not to diagnose perimenopause, but to see how it's changing over time. I'm training for a marathon. I'm worried about the marathon because it's going to fall right in my cycle, which is very heavy at the moment. So I'm thinking, oh, how can I run 42 kilometers with like a heavy period? So we're really keeping a track on it. And just the last test that we did, my testosterone levels were completely flat, which if the doctor hadn't have just tested that just to see what was going on, we would never have known that. And she's saying, well, you're running a marathon and you've got no testosterone in your system. So it may not necessarily diagnose the perimenopause, but there may be things in that hormonal trend the doctor can look at and think, wow, one little bit of treatment for you for that will help you anyway, irrespective of what phase you're in from that menopause transition. Yeah.
Well, see, you just brought up testosterone. Now, this is something that I want to definitely know more about because I didn't even think about it. Honestly, and I'm embarrassed to say I didn't even realize I had it.
Yeah. Well,
so let's talk more about that. How?
Yeah.
So obviously you can have that tested through a blood test.
Yes, you can.
Okay, so if you have depleted levels of testosterone, how does that impact you?
Yeah, lots of things actually. It's interesting, right? Because you think testosterone, male hormone, muscle.
Yeah.
Think about that. That gives you some clues as to what it actually does. And as the sidebar said to my husband, well, no wonder you could run faster than me. You've got more testosterone and you've got more muscles. So usually what happens with the menopause transition is that your testosterone levels will drop. They will actually go up again later on, but we'll just talk about that sort of perimenopause, menopause transition. And they're usually quite low towards the end of that late phase of perimenopause, which is unusual in my case because I haven't got many of the other signs of late perimenopause. So everyone's just so different, right? There's no textbook here. There's trends that are similar. So low testosterone usually will impact libido. That's one of the main signs that why women will typically go to a doctor and speak to them about that. But other things testosterone does for you is helps with your muscle strength, your muscle mass as well. So if I'm running a marathon and I haven't got this in my system, that might impact me with that as well. Usually the libido is the main one, but it is a really important hormone because you actually do need a level of testosterone for that muscle strength, for a healthy libido, and for other things in your body. So it's a sort of the unknown or the untalked about hormone, but actually one that's being treated already quite a lot in Australia. So and the rest of the world. But if we just think locally, we actually have a prescription testosterone gel designed for this in Australia, designed for lower dosing of hormones for women, because when you need testosterone or in fact any hormone replacement in this phase of life, you need lower doses of hormones. You don't need really high doses, which come in the more male type formats of these products. So we're very lucky in that there is a brand here that has a lower dose of the testosterone, which makes it very easy for women to be able to dose that as they need it in this time of life.
And is it something that you take every single day?
Yeah, it does depend. In my case, yes, I am taking it every single day. It's a cream, so I'm just putting the cream on my leg and, letting it sort of dry in the morning, and I've got the dose from my doctor. So yeah, it can be every day. But with all the hormone therapies that you may or may not be given, if you're using them, it's very different for everybody. So it may be that you use some of the progesterone products more cyclically, so only for a couple of weeks a month. Some of the other products you may take every day. And then usually you'll go back to your doctor and say, I did all of this. And they'll say, oh, actually, maybe we'll pare it back and use it less often or more often. But with this particular one, it usually is a daily dosing.
And Sarah, how has it changed the way you feel by taking testosterone?
Another really good one. So funny story. And you would think that me, of all people, would be fine with this, but it really, really gave me some perspective. So I got the script filled. I've just moved from Melbourne to regional Victoria. So I got the script filled and my doctor had me a product compounded for me, which is usually you can get commercial products. My doctor chose, for whatever reason, to have it compounded. So I got it down in Melbourne because we didn't know if there was anywhere up here. Took a while to get it. I only picked it up last week. And when I went to the pharmacy to pick it up, the pharmacist said, oh, I'm not sure about this. Are you sure that this is safe, like the way the doctor's prescribed it? And I was like, I got worried. I'm like, gosh, have I missed something? I've just written a book on this stuff, so I pretty sure I know what's going on. I rang my doctor. She's very open, and she said, I'm so sorry that happened. And she gave the pharmacist some feedback, and they've spoken to me. It's all fine. There's nothing bad about what the pharmacist said, but the way they said it made me think, oh my gosh, is it safe? So do you know what? I actually hung on to it for about 2 or 3 days and didn't use it. Knowing everything that I know, the psychology in my mind still was like, oh, but someone said it might not be safe. So I really felt that moment of fear. My doctor was amazing. So I've only just started using it probably 4 or 5 days ago. So I'll let you know how I feel.
Yeah, because I'd be interested because I'm actually thinking I'd like to start taking it myself.
Yeah, and so you, again, speak to the doctor, see whether it's right for you, but definitely blood tests are a good way of seeing how much is in your system. It can sometimes rise again a bit later on in sort of mid-60s, like later on again. So it's not for everyone at every time, and everybody will be different.
Yeah.
Am I going to start to grow more facial hair and
Because of that hormone? I mean,
In later life, that's probably why we do see, you cute little nonna that might have a little bit of hair on her chin or whatever. So that may happen in later life if levels go up again. But with the dose that you're taking to replace, you like I haven't got enough in my system to do what my body needs. So the dose I'm using is to replace what I don't have and put me back into more of a normal range. So if I was to start growing chin hairs or having symptoms like that, we'd discuss with the doctor and say, well, actually, maybe the dose is a bit much. So usually when you're taking these things, they should make you feel better. Yes, all medicines tend to have some type of side effect. It's not, everyone's very different. Some women take the products and feel completely fine. Others take it, can't tolerate it as well, so need a dose adjustment. That's why this space is so interesting, because it's not like similar to thyroid health. Like, it's not like you just go to the doctor and get an antibiotic and everyone gets a very similar dose. The dose, the treatment regime, the duration is very different and will change because every 3 to 6 months, your body is continuing to change. So it's really important to have a good doctor to help support you through that process.
100%. Absolutely. And someone that you can just constantly ask those questions when you feel like you're in the dark. Because we spoke, when we spoke a week ago, I was saying to you how there is so much information, which is fantastic, but there's too much information to the point where, I don't know, does that apply to me? So by going to speak to a professional practitioner, that is definitely a great place to start. Now, the other one that I want to ask you about, which is probably the most controversial one, is HRT. Now, I will tell you a little bit about my own story. So about just over a year ago, I spoke to an amazing menopause psychologist. And at the time, I wasn't taking it, but I was postmenopause. And after speaking to her, I said to her, so does that mean that I can still take it? And she said, of course, 100%. And this is what then got me really thinking about, wow, there is so much that we don't know. And I grew up with my mother who had a hysterectomy. I think she was 50. She went on it for a little bit, but then of course the scaremongery, she went off it after 5 years because you can't take it for more than 5 years. And then she did, if I think back, she did suffer a lot through those post years. So learning so much about it and realizing that, oh my God, no, it does help. I really want to understand, and I want to ask you the basic question. So what is HRT?
Yeah, it's a good question. And gosh, it's such an interesting space. And to dovetail from the last piece that you're talking about, that overload of information, we've come from and everyone's doing this with good intent, right? We want all this information so women are more empowered, and it's amazing. But sometimes it can lead to people just thinking it's all just too hard. So we just need to get that balance right. So hormone replacement is replacing these key hormones. So essentially there's 3 main ingredients that you'll get in hormone replacement. You'll get a form of estrogen, a form of progestogen, which is like a progesterone type product, and a testosterone. They're your 3 kind of options. What is it? Basically, it's lower doses of those hormones compared to sort of something that's like the pill or previously that you may have had. So it's much lower doses of those hormones to replace what you're losing. So when you think about the pill in earlier years, higher doses of more synthetic hormones to override your natural cycle, to stop you ovulating so that you don't get pregnant. It's not like that. It's lower doses to replace what you're missing, to give you enough to put you in a zone to relieve symptoms. But, importantly, and we look at your mother and what benefits would have been if she potentially had continued it, it's not just about the now, it's also about the later. So many things happen in perimenopause and menopause transition that we don't see. We don't see that our bone strength is, impacted. We don't see that our muscles, you probably do see. The bones and the heart are the 2 that I kind of call the silent things that are happening. And even though all the other ones are impacting our life, the bone and the heart one are the ones that are really going to impact us in later life. So your bone health your bones are getting weaker. So in older life, if you are to fall, you're more likely to fracture or break bones, and that's osteoporosis, osteopenia. But then heart health, our heart health risk equals that as a man as we enter menopause. And before that, our risk of heart issues is much lower than men. So the reason why we're getting all this new news about HRT, and there was a lot of previous media that was negative about it, which was really poorly represented in the media. The reason why we're getting all this talk now is because if women aren't getting it, especially in that postmenopausal phase or when they need it, they're actually not going to be setting themselves up for stronger bones and better heart health in later years. And those are things that will cause a lot of problems in later life. So that's why it's important to listen to that information. But again, it's very individual. And not to be controversial, but I also was thinking this morning to myself, I went for a run, and I was thinking, well, there are still some small minority of individuals that can't take it. And that might be because of precautions. That might be because they don't tolerate it. Whatever that reason is, it's not like every person in the world is the same. And then I thought, well, they must feel really bad about themselves then, because they're watching all this social media saying everyone has to take it. It's really great, which I don't disagree with. I think it's fantastic. The evidence is wonderful. The safety profile is fine. But if you can't use it, don't feel terrible about it, would be my my share for you. There are other things that you might be able to do to help support you in different ways. So it's definitely great. We should all be trying to access it if we can, but there will still be some people that can't use it, which I don't think that's being shared as openly in the media as well. And I worry about that small percentage of women that are feeling quite bad about themselves because they can't or are unable to take it for whatever reason.
Yeah. Another thing that I've been hearing more about, and I don't really understand, it's bioidentical. Can you explain that?
Yeah. So really that terminology, if there's a bit of that talk, again, controversial, that this is a marketing term, and look, in a way it kind of is, but I find it quite useful because there's two different types of hormones that can be included in hormone replacement therapy. So back in the older days when the Women's Health Initiative study was done, which is the one that stirred up all these things saying it causes breast cancer, which now I'm sure you've seen this, that research was misinterpreted, etc. So they used more synthetic forms of hormones. So more synthetic forms of estrogen and more synthetic forms of progesterone. So for an example, when you look on a label, and there's still a product available in Australia that has the more synthetic estrogen, it'll have equine estrogens on the label. And that's from horse urine, pregnant horse urine, where they derive the hormones from that. And that's how you used to get estrogen. Nowadays, we have newer forms of estrogen and progesterone, which are called body identical or bioidentical. And that means that they just have the same molecular shape as the ones our body produces. Whereas the synthetic ones were a little bit different to the molecular shape of the ones we normally produce. So these are more seen as more natural. It's important to know they're still formed in a laboratory, but they're derived from things like wild yams and things like that. So they come from natural sources, even sometimes from animal ovaries. So they're still converted in the laboratory into this format, but they're more like the ones we naturally produce. And the reason for saying the two different ones, and we hear a lot of talk about it, is the previous research which showed presented a bit of negativity around breast cancer was using the older type synthetic hormones. And the newer ones have been seen to have much more favorable safety profile. They're much more better tolerated as well. So that's why we're saying bioidentical. But at the end of the day, 95+% of people in Australia getting prescribed HRT or MHT or whatever they call it is getting the body identical version, because most of the products on the market contain that. So it also is different. I don't know if you've got listeners all over the world. I'm sure you do. It's different in different countries. So in the US and the UK, there's a lot of different types of more compounding happening and a lot of other things. So I think if you're in Australia, just think about that. If you get it prescribed by a doctor, most times it's going to be body identical, but there's no harm in asking the question to the doctor, is the form you're giving me body identical? And just checking on the label what the name of it is. And if it says combined equine estrogens, you know it's not. It's more of a synthetic type. Bit harder with progesterone because the names are all quite confusing. So for that one, you want the oral micronized progesterone, which is the one that's most commonly prescribed as well. So it's a bit confusing, but it's good to know because it's a question that you should ask because you preferably want those types.
Yeah, right. I was going to say, but you would want the bioidentical, wouldn't you? Yeah, fair enough. So I have a friend who she's in her mid-50s and she was going through all these symptoms back in her 40s and they stuck her on the contraceptive pill. And now she's reading all about this stuff and she's now starting to think, I think I should actually move over to HRT. What is the difference? Why do they put you on the pill? Or is that just something that's really old-fashioned?
You've just got all the great questions. Remember the pill, we spoke about the pill being higher doses of hormones to override. So if you're taking the pill, I will just say, and you're in this phase of life, it's not going to delay perimenopause, but it may not make the symptoms as easy to spot because you're giving your body a lot more hormones, right? So that's just one thing to bear in mind. It's nothing not to scare anybody, but it's not going to stop it and delay it. It's just going to make it a bit harder to spot because you're not naturally experiencing those hormone changes. Now, there is reasons why a doctor might prescribe the pill, though. So it is very common for a doctor to prescribe the pill, in my experience with the clients that I have in perimenopause, for a variety of reasons. But the one that I mainly see it prescribed for is where women have very, very heavy periods and are losing lots of blood and their iron levels are dropping quite a lot because of that. And we're talking, changing, wearing a pad and a tampon and changing it 4 or 5 times a day. Like we're talking very heavy blood loss. And the loss of blood's causing lack of iron and they're getting unwell because of that. HRT won't stem heavy bleeding because the hormone levels aren't enough to do that. So if a woman has very heavy bleeding, a doctor will often go to the pill first for that. There may be a variety of other reasons. And look, there probably is a level of some doctors still not feeling 100% confident and comfortable with safety of HRT and the evolution of that over time. So in your friend's case, I'd suggest they go back to the doctor and have a discussion. And the best question I think you can ask is, well, can you please explain to me why you've chosen for me to take the pill versus for me to take HRT? And let the doctor explain that reasoning and in question that reasoning as well. So say if the doctor was to say, well, it's around safety, you can question and say, well, can you explain the safety profile of the pill compared to HRT? Because it's much higher levels of hormones in the pill. There are actually risks associated with that, but are probably more than those of HRT because the levels are lower. So it's really common that there may be a specific reason without knowing that person's medical history.
So does that mean that some women will stay on the pill for most of their life because of this? Or do you think eventually they get to the point where they'll stop it?
No, yeah. So it's only really for that period of time to control whatever the doctor is trying to control with the. So the heavy bleeding is part of that perimenopause transition. So 4 to 8 years, some say 5 to 10, but in Australia it looks like it's 4 to 8 year period. And for parts of that period of time, you may have heavier menstrual cycles. Or there may be other reasons why the doctor decides it's right for you, but it's definitely not one that you'll take forever. You would usually go off it and maybe transition to HRT if that was required for you, or you may not take anything or however that works with you and your doctor.
Okay, so if someone is, say, 70 and they're hearing all about this and thinking, I want that, but I haven't had it, can they take it that stage of life?
Yep. So it's evolving and changing. And what's interesting to know here is that there's certain drugs in Australia that are prescribed and considered safe in their profile for different ages. And so it's taking a while for some of that drug information to update. So some doctors will look at that drug information and say, well, this one says it can only be used up to a certain age, so I don't feel comfortable. Other doctors will have a lot more training in this space because they've specifically have a special interest in women's health and will understand that, it's probably going to be okay in that higher age group as well. So again, and I know we'll talk about later some tips people can use, but my advice is to ensure the doctor that you're speaking with has a special interest in or extra training in women's health and menopause and hormones, because you may experience a doctor that is looking at things a little bit differently through a different lens. And I'm not going to say that's right or wrong because the doctor needs to do what they think is clinically right for a person. But if you really want to get in-depth information about the current science, the things that are emerging, that the leaflets in the drug container is taking a bit of time to catch up on, speak to somebody really experienced in this space, because they will not turn back a woman of any age who requires HRT to improve their symptoms and their health, because they understand the benefit of that.
Yeah. So where can we seek these professionals? How can we find them?
Yeah, so the Australasian Menopause Society is a really good place to look. They've actually got a list of members. So I believe they're allied health professionals and doctors that have done additional training or identified themselves as having an interest in this space. So you can go on there and find a practitioner, choose where you live in Australia, and it actually shows you where practitioners are. It's a really good place to start. Then another tip, and this has helped some of my clients too, if you're speaking to your doctor about it and you can feel a little bit of discomfort, you can sort of say, well, look, is there another doctor that at this clinic or that you know that has a special interest in women's health? So often they may refer you. There may be another doctor in that clinic as well. And there's so many different clinics popping up. You can look on the Jean Hale's website as well. But I really love that tool from the Australasian Menopause Society, because it gives you, if you've got no idea where to start, it gives you a place to start making inquiries with.
That's great. Well, I'll definitely put that in the show notes, a link. So you can go straight there. That'd be great. I think also what I want to say is don't get put off if your GP has the big, oh no, you shouldn't, or, you've gone through it, because I was lucky. I was actually scared to go to my GP and have this conversation, because I thought, I've been told, so many GPs are going to refuse it. And she basically embraced me and she said, oh my God, yes. She said, I've just started myself. So I was lucky to find someone who is all over it, and I was able to ask lots of questions. So I think going back to what you were saying, there could be another doctor in the same clinic who specializes. If not, go somewhere else. Don't be in the dark, because I think there are so many benefits to taking it. And I mean, apart from obviously what it does to your heart health and muscle and all of that, what about your emotional well-being? How does it improve that?
Yeah, and so that it's a huge one. There's lots of women that go through this phase of life and experience very low mood and changing moods, and it actually can really improve that, because when you think about perimenopause and there's all these fluctuating hormones, that's what's causing the kind of mood change, because you haven't got that kind of balance of hormones. So your body's and your brain's trying to react, and it's working really hard against all these changes. And low mood and very even edging into depression for some women, and anxiety and overwhelm can become really impactful on their lives. And, if we look back 10, 20 years ago, a lot of women were just dealing with this or suffering in silence. So HRT can make a huge difference in that regard. Again, the doctor needs to assess if it's right for you and all of that stuff. But generally, when we look at the cohort of women that take it, mood does generally improve for the majority. So, and it's really important you touch on that, because it's sometimes, and the doctor piece as well, sometimes I find, and this is just my experience in my clinic, women are really polite and they don't want to offend the doctor, or they don't want to tell you everything, or they don't want to, if they got something, they might have been given an antidepressant for their low mood, but they're just thinking, that's not what I think I need, because I've got other symptoms and I want something else. What I suggest is sit down before your doctor's appointment and write all those things out and tell your health professional exactly how you feel. So say, I was actually scared to come here today and talk to you about this, because I'm seeing all this stuff on social media and I'm scared that you're just going to give me an antidepressant, but I think I need HR. Actually tell them how you're thinking. And it's funny because I also have male clients and they'll just tell me what they're thinking. And I think I wish the women would be a little bit more advocate for yourself and be honest with the doctor about that. If you're having that conversation with the doctor and you don't feel like it's going well, it's a partnership. If that partnership's not working, you have a choice to leave that room and find somebody where that partnership will work. And your health is the most important thing in your life. 100%. So if you feel like you've went to the doctor and you didn't get the response that you felt was right, you can speak to somebody else. But I will say that sometimes it may not, in the minority of people, be suitable. So there's also the situation where I have to feel for the doctors a bit, in that if someone's coming in seeing all this stuff on social media saying, everyone should take it, it's amazing, which is true to a degree, but that individual for some reason can't take it, then the doctor is probably in a bit of a tricky situation. But if they're across all the science, like you said, and at the leading edge, they'll give you very clear and accurate reasons why. Not just, I don't think it's safe, or I'm not sure about it. They'll actually say, well, this is based on this study, and I can share that with you if you'd like to read more information. So it's about understanding and being empowered and being your own advocate when it comes to health.
Yeah, it's so important. And also just getting not just help via, say, the medicine side of things, but psychologically. I mean, what would you recommend for someone who is feeling quite down? Or it's a big transition for us all. It's sometimes it's really hard to deal with it and get your head around the fact that your body is changing. And I think, we're all about pro-age, right? But at the same time, we're still dealing with the fact that we are getting older, and that can be really hard to deal with.
It can, and it's a time of life where you're peaking in your career. Your parents are usually aging, so you're worrying about that. You have children of all different types of age. So it's also happening at the most busiest juncture of your life, right? So I also really highly recommend speaking to a psychologist, asking for a mental health plan from your doctor. So in Australia, you can get 10 very heavily rebated appointments with a psychologist if you get a mental health plan from your GP. Ask for that. Say, okay, that's great, but you've given me all these things. I really want to speak to somebody, because that can be really effective. The other thing I'd say is try and put some things in your life that help improve your lifestyle. And lifestyle is a really arbitrary word, but can you really find time to rest and relax and restore? Because we often are go, 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 but can you find half an hour in your day where you just sit outside and have a cup of tea and breathe in the fresh air, ground your feet, listen to your favorite music, do stuff for you every single day? Because the other thing that happens is we're busy, everyone relies on us, our hormones are changing, we're feeling flat, we don't feel like ourselves anymore. You feel like a bit of a different version of you. So then you just keep going and try to overcompensate, but can you actually just stop and think about things that you might be able to do, or techniques like deep breathing, or breathing exercises, or going for a walk just to recharge yourself a bit? I find out personally myself, you put yourself up, you think, I've got to get everything done. Like, I've just moved house. I was telling you, I've got to unpack everything. I've got this beautiful new property. Well, actually, just go outside and breathe the fresh air and give yourself that time. Little things like that will also help, but definitely speaking to a medical professional is most important.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so damn unfair, isn't it, this sandwich generation that we're in? It's like, why is it happening now when you have to have your wits about you about dealing with all these things that are going on? But, it is what it is. But I think having the support is so important, and people like yourself, and that's why I want to move to your new book, which congratulations, that is amazing. So, why did you want to write this book? Is it from your personal experience, or is it also to help others? But yeah, why was it?
Yeah, it kind of wasn't driven by my personal experience, but I definitely knew I was in that phase of life. And I think being in that phase of life makes you a lot more empathetic towards how it feels. It's more because I have this online clinic, and when I'm a pharmacist and nutritionist, and when you're a nutritionist, most times people book an appointment with you because they want to lose weight. And although I'm happy to help and support people with that, I often find that there's often something else that they really want to strive for in health. And if we get a bit of a different goal, like I want to play with the grandkids more, or I want to be able to run 5 kilometers, or another goal can help, because weight usually by itself is very difficult to just lose weight and speak to somebody every month about that. Over time, I was getting lots of women referred from a local gym, and all were having very similar symptoms, all in a very similar age group, all going through these hormonal changes. And I built a bit of a system where we kind of looking at it holistically. We look at their diet, we look at their lifestyle, we look at evidence-based supplements, we look at speaking to a doctor and preparing them for a conversation with their doctor. and really having great success with these women, and them saying to me, well, everybody else needs to know about this. So that's why I put the book together, to really help you build your own action plan. So it takes you through, I talk about it like baking a cake, all of the elements of baking a cake, and everyone's cake's different, and how you can actually mold that for yourself personally. And I know we spoke about just a couple of minutes ago, it's a bit unfair and you can feel a bit all doom and gloom about it. But what I want the book to hopefully do for women is to feel actually empowered to think, well, first, knowledge is power. But second, there are science-based strategies that will help you through this phase of life. And whether it's HRT, which we've spent a lot of time talking about because definitely needs that airtime, but there's things that you can change in your diet that will have a little bit of an impact, in your lifestyle, a little bit of an impact. And all those things layering up will help you feel a lot better, because it's not just a one silver bullet approach when it comes to this sort of phase of life. So hopefully that helps a lot of people through this journey.
Yeah, and I love the title. It's not you, it's perimenopause. I thought that was really cute.
Somebody asked me if we could create some T-shirts. I'm like, pretty good idea.
Yeah, you can have merch. I love it.
Yeah.
Awesome. Because we're all very proud to be out there saying, yes, I'm through it, I'm going through it. You know, that's the thing. I think the shame has shifted. Women are having these conversations, which is amazing. And why I got you on today is because, yes, there's so much information out there, but, you know, sometimes you kind of just got to go back and ask those basic questions. And like, I've already had so many aha moments through our own conversations, like, oh, okay, yep, I get this now. And yeah, I think it's great to have the information, but sometimes having so much becomes very overwhelming. So I can't wait to read your book. It's just going to be, it's like a little Bible, isn't it? Just to be able to flick through that. That's so good. Well, Sarah, thank you so much. Now, we could go on for days, couldn't we, talking about so many parts of menopause, but I encourage my listeners to definitely buy your book. I'll put it in the link. And also, that's what I wanted to say. Your social media, I love it because you're very natural and it's very relatable. And that's what I really liked about you. It's like, oh, this woman actually makes sense. She's breaking it down because you don't want all that scientific information. It's like, we're not scientists. The everyday person does not understand that. So you just dumb it down for us. So I will definitely put the link to your Instagram account, which is fantastic. And good luck with your work. I think it's amazing that women out, you know, like you are out there helping us better understand ourselves and being able to have a better life mentally and physically. So I love to end all my episodes with the same question. I love a quote. I find quotes can sometimes set me up for the day. Now, do you have a quote that you'd like to share with us that's been impactful in your life?
Yes, I do. And it's from Sam Armitage, who's a TV celeb personality. And I love it. And you've reminded me, Michelle, I need to go back to it. And I have just done this myself in my move. But the quote is, edit your life frequently and ruthlessly. It's your masterpiece after all.
Oh,
and I just love it
that.
because, you know, we have this view that it's linear and you have to do certain things in a certain order. And then we compare ourselves to other people, and social media just makes that worse. But, you know, you can make changes in your life. Like, you can change your environment if you, and some people I understand can't in certain situations, but what can you do throughout your life to constantly edit and check in with yourself? Like, is that thing serving me? No, it's not. Can I change that? So I kind of love it and always think, oh, is this a moment where I need to think about what I need to edit out or bring in? So yeah, I love it.
It's like your life is a novel. And no author has just gone with the first draft. It's constantly changing. Yeah, there you go.
Many times, to the point where, like, I don't even think it's the book's here. I don't even think I can stomach reading it one more time for a little while. I think it'll rest for a bit and I'll turn to another book.
Oh, amazing. Well, thank you, Sarah, for your knowledge, for your book. As I said, I'll leave everything in the show notes, all the links, and all the best with it. I look forward to your book launch as well and meeting you in person.
Thank you. And thanks for having me, Michelle. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Absolute pleasure.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Your Second Act. If you enjoyed this episode, I'd love it if you could rate and leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. Your feedback means the world to me.